In this video, I want to talk about why I like to use Apollo and Clay together to get the best of both worlds. So really it comes down to the filters that you have available in Apollo, especially once you're on a paid plan. If you're on the free plan, you don't get quite as many, but I'll show you some examples and explain to you why I think they're good. So first thing is you get access to funding information, and when you open this up, it gives you access to the type of funding as well as the last funding date and amount. Now this might not be as complete as doing a search that starts with Crunchbase, for example, or Dealroom or PitchBook, but it's great that this is here because in comparison, if I was to set up a find companies search in Clay, it has funding raised where it just has these very wide ranges, and it doesn't let you search by type, and it doesn't let you search by, and when I say type I mean funding type, and it doesn't let you search by date range, so it's basically just pretty useless. But if you're already paying for Clay, then it's no extra cost, so that's nice. But you get this. So there's funding information. Headcount growth, this is another interesting signal because obviously you can set here the growth range, minimum to maximum. So if you want to avoid companies that have shrank in the last 12 months, you would say minimum growth 0%, time frame 12 months. But you can also, if you have a very wide TAM available to you, then you could start setting the growth range to say minimum of 10% over the last 12 months, 6 months, 24 months. Again, this is just a feature that's just not available in Clay. So being able to do it here in Apollo is very nice indeed. So that's there. I'm going to clear those filters. Next we have founded year. So this is also very useful because I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations, but you can assume that companies that have been around for a very long time tend to have very well established structures and are therefore less susceptible to changing their processes. And that often is what you want them to do when you're doing outbound. You want them to start using your service or your client service or your product or whatever. So being able to filter by companies that were founded since 2010, for example, means that they're going to be more susceptible to change, hypothetically speaking. Also, it means that they are most likely to be using Google Workspace as their email infrastructure, since Google Workspace started gaining popularity among startups probably within the last 6 years, I would guess, maybe longer than that. So Google Workspace is much easier to land in the inbox of compared to Microsoft mailboxes, and older companies tend to be on Microsoft more because that's all there was back then, for the most part anyway. And then why would you change something if it's not totally broken? So most of them just stayed on Microsoft, and then they grew and now they're too big to suddenly switch to Google. So anyway, there's that. Then there's employees by headcount. This is another awesome filter that lets you choose, for example, like, a lot of what I've done with cold email is for recruitment agencies. So I can say human resources, maximum employees, 1. And the real power from this comes when we start looking at how many job posts do they have. Well, another great thing that it has here, if you're on a paid plan, is job postings. So we can say currently hiring for, and you can put in keywords here, but you can also say job located at, but you could also just say active job postings, minimum 3 or 5. So now you have companies that have at least 3 job postings within a certain range, and they only have a maximum of 1 person in their HR department, and there are 20 companies here. Now that's obviously, you want to get a lot more companies in your list than that, but the fact that you can do this with Apollo and it instantly just brings up that data is so powerful because what happens when a company is hiring a lot and they don't have a talent acquisition person or an internal recruiter? Their senior leadership people are just being swamped with having to screen resumes, set up interviews, conduct interviews, get feedback on candidates, and so they don't have someone dedicated, so they're in a lot of pain. And that's the sort of hypothesis behind the targeting for using these filters. So that's also awesome. Moving down here, job titles, pretty standard. People lookalikes is a beta feature which I haven't experimented with yet. Companies, it lets you put in a list of companies, so you can target people at specific companies, and you can put up to about 9, sometimes a bit higher than 9,000 domain names in here to get very specific. And let's imagine you have 27,000 companies you want to find people at. Just segment that in a Google Sheet into 3 lists. 9,000, 9,000, 9,000 domains. Do 3 separate searches in Apollo. There you go. You've got now 3 different lists which you can then combine in Clay and enrich. So that's another awesome feature of Apollo. Company lookalikes, this is another beta feature. Company lookalikes is getting more and more popular. So I think Ocean.io is sort of the main pioneer of that. Panda Match is another service that has an amazing reputation for finding lookalikes of your ideal companies. Then let's see what's next. Location, pretty standard stuff there. Zip code radius is a feature though that's there, which is very nice. And then this is another thing, employee headcount range. In Clay, what does it give you? And I'm not dissing Clay. Clay is incredible. It's amazing. I spend like 10 hours a day in Clay. Not because I hate it, right? So employee headcount range. Why am I just not seeing it right now? Because my eyes are tired, I believe, is the reason. Company sizes, sorry. So you get these very rigid and wide ranges, like 51 to 200 employees. I'm sorry, but like a 51 person company has a very different set of problems than a 200 size person company. So these ranges are just not great. Of course you can enrich them. Like you can use Claygen to find out the approximate employee headcount of a company and then put them into like different segments in your Clay workflow if you want to do that way. But in Apollo, you can set a custom range and be very specific, like 4 to 7 people. I'm only interested in companies that have 4 to 7 people, guys. But you can get very specific, right? So that's very nice. Also, don't neglect number of employees as unknown. That should be a separate search, because if the number of employees is unknown, they just wouldn't come up if you're setting a custom range or a predefined range. So you want to do a separate search to get them. Then industry and keywords. There's a lot of flexibility here. So you can set predefined industries. Now Clay is much better at this. Clay has way more predefined industries than Apollo. And Clay also has AI filters like industries, sub-industries. You can get very granular with this now, whereas Apollo doesn't have that. But Apollo lets you search for, let's see, keywords, pretty much the same, but you can say what kind of keywords would you like to search for? Name, keywords, company description. Yes, I would love to search the company descriptions, not just keywords, not just the company name. And yeah, that's one thing. And then exclude keywords. Now, sneakily, quite often when you click on this, that would, no, not this one, include keywords often, well, all the time actually. When you first use this, the type of keywords area is hidden, and you need to open this up and check company description. Otherwise, it's only going to search company name and keywords, and you have a much smaller list. So just be aware of that. Whereas exclude keywords, company description is automatically checked, which is good for you, so you can exclude more of the garbage that you don't need. Now it does have AI filters. It says this is new. Again, it's something I haven't tested out yet, not too sure about it. It has buying intent, like buying intent signals. From my experience, these have not been awesome. Like normally when you try these, the list size just goes tiny, and I'm not sure how they're getting that information, but it doesn't seem like they're too proactively sourcing it to keep it fresh. Territories I don't use. Technologies is a really good one. So, you know, in Clay, you would have to use the built with integration, and it's going to cost you a load of Clay credits whenever you do that. Not sure how many. Here, you can just search for technologies like Core Rail. So it has quite specific technologies. Unbounce. It has things like the Google Ads Pixel, if you're a PPC agency, Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics. All of these things are useful. Let's see if it has SEMrush. Yeah, it has SEMrush. Very good to know. If a company has that, they're serious about their SEO and possibly their PPC. Revenue ranges. This is, in my experience, this will filter out a lot of companies that actually are within your revenue range, but Apollo just doesn't have that data, so I don't use this. Job postings I've already talked about. Signals. Recently promoted. This is a person signal. Former champion or changed jobs, award of recognition. So there are these to play with, but in my experience they just dramatically reduce your list size, which is not what I'm going for. And then also email status, email verified. If you just want companies that have a verified email address, not companies, people who have a verified email address, you could check this, but don't just trust that data. You have to validate that using other tools like Lead Magic Validate Work Email or Million Verifier or any of the other email validation tools out there. Generally what I would do though, if I want to get the biggest list size possible, I would leave this unchecked so that you get a much bigger list. And this is sort of segueing into why I love using Apollo with Clay, is because when I export this list and I have a massive list where some of them have valid email addresses, some of them don't, it doesn't matter because Clay is going to find those anyway. So when I import the people as a CSV file into a table, like this table here, what's going to happen is they're going to go through an email waterfall of my building, my design, my liking. So what I would typically do is validate the email address if one came from Apollo initially. If it did and it's valid, then great, happy days, we move on. But if no email address was found, or if the email is invalid, then we would use Lead Magic to find an email address. And the great thing about that is Lead Magic is so awesome. It tells you whether that email address is valid catch-all. It tells you the MX provider like Microsoft or Google, so you can segment them if you want to in your campaigns. It also tells you which are using Proofpoint, Barracuda Networks, and email security gateways, or security email gateways, SEGs, however you like to say it, who cares? But that's available to you. And so now you know, okay, cool, so this person, valid catch-all, Proofpoint. Let's not put that person in the same campaign as our Googles or our Microsofts. Let's put them in another campaign with dedicated mailboxes if we want to see if we can even reach them in the first place. And those mailboxes might burn, but our main batch of mailboxes will be protected from the wrath of Proofpoint. Now, if Lead Magic didn't find a valid email address, we use Find Email. It's really great. It just finds so many emails that other providers can't find. But then we don't trust the status, because Find Email will say, yeah, it's valid, but when you run it through Lead Magic, Lead Magic validate work email, sometimes Lead Magic will say, actually, no, that's not valid. But also, Lead Magic will tell you, yeah, it's valid, but they are on Proofpoint, or they're on SoFast, or they're on Mimecast. And so then we segment valid email addresses, security gateways, valid email addresses, right? So that's just one example of the power of combining Apollo with Clay, is because of the enrichment you can do in Clay. Another thing is, a lot of the lists that you'll get from Apollo will just be full of crap. And until the days of tools like Clay, up until like a year and a half ago, I was literally going through Google Sheets to just delete leads based on their job titles manually, and having my team do that manually, which sucks. But obviously now with AI, we can just run a qualify title. As you can see here, we're saying there are two requirements that the job title must meet in order to be qualified. The first is seniority, must be a manager level and above. And the second is the job function, so marketing, growth, revenue. Also, if their titles like founder, CEO, COO, then they should be classed as, qualified. It's totally up to you how you want to do this. And then, of course, like what job titles or keywords in the job title would indicate they're not qualified. Words like junior, paralegal, legal assistant, and so on. So every time you run a workbook for a different industry, I would recommend to get your prompt, copy your prompt, put it into a good LLM that you trust. I like using Claude, and just saying, adapt this prompt for HVAC companies, or adapt this prompt for local businesses, or adapt this prompt for SaaS companies or marketing agencies or whatever, and just give it as much information as you can to make it output a customized prompt version for your particular needs in that particular table. So now we can just run this at scale, and that just saves us a ton of time because it's going to qualify the job titles. We can also get a decent company description and qualify the companies to see if those companies are a fit for our needs, if they are likely to even have a need for our service or product. And so all of this can be handled in Clay. And once you have a decent Clay table built, it is just set it and forget it, basically. You can just download Apollo lists to your heart's content and keep uploading them into the same Clay table, or you could even segment out and have multiple versions of your Clay table customized for each segment of your market or industries that you're interested in focusing on. And so yeah, basically that's why, in a nutshell, I just love using Apollo with Clay, because together they give you the best of both worlds. If you just use Apollo, you're going to have very messy data. If you just use Clay, you're going to have very inaccurate data that you would need to enrich further using AI and Clayagent in these tables. But if you combine them, you get the power of all these amazing filters that Apollo gives you, as well as the ability to just clean things up and qualify things like job titles and companies on autopilot. And so also the email waterfall validation and all this stuff is just so time saving and lets you scale things and have much more accurate lists that are much bigger in a lot less time than if you were going to go about it any other way. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I recommend you to try using Apollo and Clay together if you're not already. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. I have a ton more content just like this coming soon. And if you would like to chat with me about having us build workflows to help you generate leads for your business, click the link in the video description and let's have a chat, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.